One may ask, why even bother making a video on Southern Estonia? Good point, but...
Kaks meest, kes öisel tunnil kaabiraadse olemise püsti seadnud, on raimugi, et nad on ka Tartust 20 kilomeetri kaugusel.
Selle koha nimi on Kambja. Mis asja? Kambja? Jah, meil on ka Kambja.
Eks siin üht kui teist ikka leidub.
Seal metsa serval väikses majas, kus elasid mu vanemaad. Seal metsa serval väikses majas on pesa teinud punase. Aitsin kaitsa, aitsa, aivelle, me metsa vennad oleme. Aitsin kaitsa, aitsa, 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 aivelle, me metsa vennad eestlase.
Tere tulemast Eestisse, the greatest country which so kindly chose to join our mortal world. In this video, we will see the near and dear and lovely Tartu, the second largest city in Estonia and the cultural capital, the ultimate Baltic university town, as well as a region with its own culture that is a mix of Finno-Ugric or Estonian and Russian, that is home to Europe's last pagans and becomes an independent kingdom for one day, visit Russia without a visa, the mausoleum to a very high-ranking Napoleonic Wars commander, one city that is in two countries, one of the largest folk music festivals in Europe combining traditional and modern music, the largest paddling marathon in the world, and yeah, you get the idea, there's a lot to clickbait here. Southern Estonia is a gem of the Baltics as a whole. Estonia is an Eastern, Northern European country, known for some of its niches include having no people, being super modern and digitalizing anything and everything because of said no people. Yeah, it's kind of a flex, yeah. Goke ice cream, and if you're Finnish, infinite, cheap, uncivilized labor, and the ex-promised land of cheap alcohol. And well, in Southern Estonia, all of it is amplified. So today, as a partly Southern Estonian myself, let's go and uncover some of my turf. Following the abrupt end of the Finno-Turanic Hyperborean kingdom, the lands of Southern Estonia were eventually settled by the Finno-Baltic peoples, a subdivision of the Uralic peoples, who become Estonians, specifically Southern Estonians, as, yeah, they're actually different. By the 13th century, Estonia was divided into 15 ancient counties, and all was great. But then, some rando with a funny hat shows up, doesn't really get along with the locals, and in response, suddenly a bunch of German knights appear to kill and destroy, Christianize the Baltics. Despite them actually losing at first, being a papacy-funded school project, the wall came crashing down in the end, with mainland Estonia falling in 1224. The region was the last corner of Europe to be Christianized. In the medieval land of St. Mary or Livonia, beautiful towns emerged, trade flourished, people died of the plague. It was great. Until it wasn't. With the Teutonic Order controlling these lands getting pieced up, its neighbors were eyeing up the ever so vulnerable and fertile Livonia, so the Order Master just stopped trying, disbanding itself in 1561, ending the medieval period in Livonia, I guess. And an almost continuous 70-year period of war to control it followed, with a Russian schizo destroying everything, and once he was dealt with, the victors, Poland and Sweden, proceeded to fight over the already devastated lands for another 30 years. What followed was a good old Swedish time. Most notably, the Reformation they brought with them brought about a church that would actually care to include the native folk and provide education, including preaching in the native language and not blindly sifting through incomprehensible 1500-year-old scripts as you travel into your own mystic world, not naming any names here. And then, the century turned. Famine came, then the Great Northern War by Russia, and for the icing on the cake, the plague. All in all, this killed about 70 to 80% of all Estonians. Thanks to these fuck-ass German snobs, though, a deal was reached where Livonia would get special treatment. German is the main language, the Lutheran Church, the Landtag. It was effectively a Baltic German, not a Russian, state. This is also why serfdom was abolished 50 years earlier than in Russia, and most importantly, the Estonian national awakening, that we were tortured with in school, so I won't say too much, borrowed a lot from the national revivals in Germany and Europe. And its epicenter, with all the institutions, the big guys and events, was where else than Southern Estonia. Then came along a new, very mean Tsar, who saw all these non-Russian territories and decided that they would now become Russian. Fortunately, Europe had reached its threshold. Yeah. Europe had reached its threshold to begin another generation-ending war, and in the chaos of the collapse of the Russian and German empires, Estonia finally got its chance for independence. And then 2 weeks after World War I ended, the Bolsheviks launched another one, which was completely undone within weeks thanks to a few makeshift old trains with guns on them. And then the Germans also attacked, having already taken over Latvia, trying to establish their dream LARP state thing. They got obliterated all the way to Riga, back to where they came from 700 years ago. And with the Bolshevik front at a standstill, the Peace of Tartu was signed on February 2nd, 1920, which would become Estonia's permanent verification for global recognition, which went just about as well as you'd expect. So by 1940, it was Soviet, with a few years of a weirdly large wave of German tourists, and then Soviet liberation. Fortunately, South Estonians are known to be racist, so whoever couldn't escape took to the forest to farm NKVD officers until eventually falling apart, seeing as the indomitable Soviet Union seemed to be here to stay. Freedom rekindled in the 80s, which achieved many great feats, such as singing banned Estonian music, waving banned insignia without care, forming the largest human chain in the world, which gave inspiration to many other oppressed peoples, civilians chasing out Soviet troops, all without a drop of blood. The singing revolution ended with Estonia's restoration of independence in 1991. Following the very trenchous 90s, Estonia got back on its feet, joining the EU and NATO, and its staggering growth became an economic miracle, all from scratch. So, welcome to Estonia, and welcome to the center of Southern Estonia and their first destination, Estonia's second biggest city, cultural capital and university town, Tartu. And about 100,000 pretentious snobs whose life mission is to convince people their city is better than Tallinn, Tartu is quite the notable place. So let's explore it. We start at the town hall square, with its town hall on one end and the Emajõgi, or the Mother River, on the other. Although not exactly long or wide, it is great. It is the beating heart of the city, especially in the summer when the vibe here is wonderful.
What a nice view.
What a nice view.
Very
I hope
nice
it's
view,
not ruined by a Latvian.
Küll midagi sellist ei ole.
Lätis küll midagi sellist ei ole.
Here also stands this arch bridge, which is fine and all until you realize a much cooler bridge once stood here. The Stone Bridge, the most iconic landmark of Tartu, until it was blown up in World War II. It was so iconic, in fact, that randomly the Austrian painter himself, back in his aspiring artist arc, painted it. And I mean, that's Tartu in a nutshell. A 1,000-year-long story of pain and suffering, then prospering, and rinse and repeat. The very first mentions of the city is the Kiovan Rus conquering an existing settlement here by who they referred to as Chads. These Chads then retake and burn down the Rus settlement, and then 160 years later, the Crusaders destroyed Chad town. Then it becomes a regional center in Livonia, then Ivan the Terrible's Russia hit it hard in the Livonian War, then it prospered again under Sweden, and then the now enlightened and European Russian Empire fully razes it to the ground in 1704. Then, under the National Awakening, the city reaches its golden age, which carries on to the First Republic. And then, 1941 and 44, a frontline city where the Germans and Soviets take turns destroying anything and everything. Since then, despite never rebuilding a few of the most well-known landmarks like the Stone Bridge, the city has risen out the ashes as it always has. It also became European Capital of Culture 2024. Wow guys, look, there's culture everywhere. There's the cultural cyberpunk bus, there's this Culture Express, and we also got a very cultural architecture.
Nah, man. Those are literally swinging on the bridge. Hey, one jump!
Which, with all these festivities, I'm sure is a very real and meaningful reward that only the best that deserve it get. Moving into town, we obviously got the obligatory pedestrian street covering the center, perfect for some memorable quality time.
Ma pean üle saama sellest kõrvalt. Ma pean nokk kinni.
Sa paned vlogi või? Appikene.
Mida ütles eestlasest peakirurg lätlasest kirurgiõpilasele? Siis kui see lätlane ütles, et ta ei taha siga lahata. Usu mind, isegi seal ei meeldi lätlased.
The only place in Estonia where you can drink in public, very important, and the St. John's Lutheran Church that pokes its head out of skyline, one of the few medieval buildings that survived. And then, where Tartu is really run, the HQ of the University of Tartu. I feel like I can't state how significant the uni is without going on a major tangent which neither of us have time for. It was the center of both the Estonian and Latvian Jesus Christ, national awakenings. It's the second oldest university in the Baltics and the ex-Swedish Empire. It's ranked the best in the Baltics, so you don't get enough of this well-deserved flex. Now go around and see for yourself that every other building is owned by the university. We then work our way up to Toomemägi, or Tom's Hill, a park and iconic spot. Like Tallinn's Toompea, this too was once an ancient fort, then taken over and built up to be the historic center where the governing matters took place and where all the important guys looked down at all the peasants below. Chief among them, the Tartu Cathedral, another brick Gothic beauty that was once the center of the bishopric of, well, Tartu, yeah. And while much of it was left just like that, the other half got turned into the university museum, of course. We then make the long, arduous journey from one end of this metropolis to another, that is under 3 kilometers. On your way strolling across town, one can come across the closest thing to Estonia's own architecture. Cute wooden buildings all around. A true trademark of any Estonian town, and there's more of it here than in every other town in Estonia combined. And then we get to this ramp, the Estonian National Museum, or ERM. It's very new and yeah, quite Estonian.
Lõunaserv,
My favorite part's gotta be the permanent exhibition on the Uralic nations, mainly focusing on the peoples who don't have the luxury or sovereignty like we do. But yeah, that's an overview of Tartu. There's of course more to do.
no kas sul on midagi veel või? Jaa.
Go walk up and down the Emajõgi in full, wander around the wooden neighborhoods, admire the infrastructure, but for us, it's time to actually dive into Southern Estonia.
Summiting the highest in Otepää. K2 is next.
And while we're on the way, why not mention another overglazed town and landscape park in the region? Otepää. This town of 2000 was once home to the most formidable, legendary and largest hill fort in southern, if not all of Estonia. But it's just a mound nowadays, so who cares? Then we have June 4th, 1884. When here at the Church of St. Mary, a group of Tartu University students gathered to bless their new flag. The blue, black and white. That only happened here because Tartu was full of stinky, annoying German snitches. This will become Estonian Flag Day, the birth of the greatest tricolor to ever grace the earth. And the church has these tablet thingies depicting the event, which is really cool. Its other claim to fame is its nature, which, you know, I mean, this is the best we got. But Otepää is the official winter sports capital of Estonia, and thus is home to the country's leading ski resorts. Winter events and yeah, you get the idea. There's some other things of note, but that's not of concern for this video. So with the obligatory Otepää mention out the way, let's head to Võromaa. This is a well-known historical and cultural region that is for many the true definition of the South. So, what can I see, you ask? Being such a well-known region, it's about as good a time as any to mention the signature places of Southern and really all of Estonia. First of all, the 1,000 manors across the country left behind by the mainly Baltic German nobility and elites. Being in this weird war-ridden Eastern European swamp though, most of them are in a state of misfortune, to say the least. As first came the Land Reform Act of 1919, a giveaway of all the nobility's manors and their lands to the local Estonian peasants, a symbolic gesture, and then the resettlement of Germans and the Soviet times where all decadent Germanic filth had to be obliterated. And you should know by now how Russians treat their new property. A bunch of them have survived in various different types of state though, and I've personally been in a few, but none that I could show without doxing myself. So as for nature, well, we do have the jaw-dropping highest mountains of Estonia here. We got one thing that makes up for them: bogs. Mostly local to cold, miserable places like Estonia, where about 20% of the country is covered in wetlands and they're worshipped like a religion. Here I was in one of them in mid-July, the one time a year Estonians bear to get out of their homes and when absolutely everyone goes off into the countryside. And not a soul in sight. Nothing could be more iconic and more postcard Estonia-y than a foggy sunrise or sunset. Absolute peak. Oh, and of course, Estonia's longest river. That is less than 200 kilometers. But remember, size isn't everything. The Võhandu, with its sandstone cliffs that are the best, it has this ancient, yes, actually ancient this time, river valley, home to some of Estonia's oldest found objects like the Neolithic Tamula Vanake from 5,000 years ago. And also it's home to the largest paddling marathon in the world, where you get a row or canoe 100 kilometers in a single day. Usually the weather in mid-April when this takes place looks like this, but you see, the one time Estoniaball shows up, it looked like this. For our last destination in Võromaa, we head to the episcopal castle of Vasselina. Despite its deceiving name in more languages than one, it's actually old as hell, being first built in 1237 as an outpost of the Livonian Knights and then rebuilt on the Feast of the Annunciation in 1342 as a border fortress and center of trade between the bishopric of Dorpat and the west and the east. So, you know, naturally, being next to Ivanland on one side and a hungry Poland and a hungrier Sweden on the other, nothing could go wrong for the most fortified castle in the entire Fatherland. What is cool though, is that its aura lives on to this day. It is still technically a religious structure as it is a pilgrim site because of the Feast of the Annunciation, and it does sit right next to the Brygapskov road, still standing as a border fortress. Well, not exactly operable, I don't think. We won't cross into Russia, however, but we do cross another border, out of Estonia, and into the brave and glorious land, and the place that takes the spotlight for this entire video. Setomaa, a Finno-Baltic and Southern Estonian land and people who aren't Estonian. On the border of east and west, the Setos or Setokõsed are who you'd assume the same as your average Jaan from Tartu, but they are not. See, ever since crossing into Võromaa, where we just came from, another special trait of Southern Estonia has entered, a distinct peoples. In Võromaa it was the Võros, a dialect just distinct enough to be considered a language. Southern Estonian in general is often considered a separate language because it's sort of an old, rural and much more Finno-Ugric sounding version of Estonian, which is also why it's more similar to Finnish. And while these other guys here mostly just died out, Võro is actually doing pretty well. And that is also why it often gets clumped up with Seto, even though they are completely different and are a culture and peoples of their own. Even their name is used as a term mostly by old and rural Estonians as a foreigner or a borderline Russian. The Setos were always under some form of Russia as opposed to the rest of Estonia, as a neglected and foreign corner of a big empire. After finally joining Estonia in 1920, it awaited a lot of development and catching up, but things were looking up. Until they weren't. As the Soviets got started with their occupation of Estonia in 1940, they quickly decided to ban being Seto and redrew the Estonian-Russian border, which split Petseri or Setomaa into two, with the vast majority of it going to the Russian SFSR, including barely the very near and dear town, the historical and cultural capital of Setomaa, Petseri, just to rub it in. While in Soviet times it didn't matter, once the Eternal Union collapsed, leaving a very nationalistic Estonia, which had just triumphed over the darkest chapter of its history, and the post-Soviet Russia, things got a lot more complicated. Negotiations in hopes to restore the legal peace of Tartu borders ended in peace of Tartu? Sorry, I don't know, I can't help you. And no progress has been made since. Most of us still got to travel between the two, but then the war and the total isolation of Russia came, which, being precisely in Russia's 7 to 90 kilometer long, already difficult to access border zone as an enemy of Russian people, yeah, I mean, really not ideal for the small cross-border Seto people now, is it? Thus, unfortunately, we will not be visiting the very interesting Russian side of Petserimaa today. What am I trying to say here? Throughout all this, the Setos, being in this borderland between Europe and Russia, have a very unique indigenous culture. They resemble Jewish people, actually. No, not the Jewish stealing land, the side and controlling the, but like actual Jewish history of being an oppressed outcast of society. And they also happen to be the wealthy and good with money ones, such as this huge silver brooch and other jewelry that are part of the women's folk costume, passed down generation to generation and worth thousands of euros. They also have this unique singing style called the leilo, which is part of UNESCO. And coolest of all, they are kind of, I don't know, Europe's last pagans? After being greeted by the Seto skyscraper, passing through the apparent midpoint of the Obinitsa, we make sure to pay our respects to the Seto god Pekko. Contrary to Estonians' Lutheranism, okay, who am I kidding? Seto religion is today mostly Eastern Orthodox, with a bit of paganism sprinkled in, even to this day. In particular, their god is him, Pekko. the god of barley and the fields, who always helped the Seto out and protected their fields, who then laid himself to eternal rest. Although the last official pagan ritual was recorded in 1930, his aura lingers on to this day, where people pay homage to a Pekko statue and offer ornaments, beer of course, and various other artifacts. So after that, and almost entering Russia a few times,
Okay, well,
we do. Remember the border drawings? Well, around the village of Satse, Russia decided it just needed, had to have this patch of forest, severing a local road for 1 kilometer. It is thanks to that here we have one of the most unique border anomalies ever, the Satse Boot, the only place in the world where you can travel through Russia without the need of a permit or visa, as long as you didn't walk or stop. That was at least until last fall, when it got closed for good. It's really a miracle that these fuck-ass border shenanigans went on for as long as they did that, but I of course get to show my exclusive experiences driving through it a few years back.
lihtsalt tuleb veel üks kord. We have just entered Russia for approximately 3 minutes.
natuke tegelikult olla silt ja mitte päriselt. Olen nii pettunud.
That was it. We're only about 30 meters. Let's go! After that, you hit the modern-day Seto capital of Värska with its not even 500 inhabitants, red roads and famous sanatoriums. We, however, head to a much cooler destination. No. To somewhere slightly more eventful than a 1 kilometer drive through the woods. Welcome to the Seto Kingdom Day. Every first weekend of August, Setomaa becomes an independent kingdom for 1 day, hosted in a different village each time, which I got to take part of in Röstna back in 2023. Damn, this video is old. The day begins with passport control, where all of us nuns have to pay for a Seto visa. Once that's sorted, you're now in Pekko's realm. There's the market, selling everything from carpets, handicrafts and authentic Seto drip to Seto koruna. There's also a bunch of food and drink stands with authentic beer and kvass. Can't live without it.
Yes, so Kali, kvass, staple drink in Estonia, the Baltics, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, made of bread, rye bread juice.
Concert venues, cruises by the lake, and hey, even the embassies of the fellow nations of Võrumaa and Mulgimaa are present. The climax of the Kingdom Day is the election of the Seto Üleptsootska, the representative or vice king of Pekko every year, which also entails flags flying high and various boring speeches. The day ends with the Seto military parade, because being where they are, they must have a military to defend themselves. After indulging in Pekko Day, we stop by the Russian border one more time by Lake Pskov or Pihkva, and then leave Setomaa.
Ma kohe pööran selle kaamera.
Heading west, we have to make a stop at this town. Entering this town, it seems like the most boring place in existence, and then you keep driving and oh, there's Latvia. And that's what makes Valga so special. As Valga or Valka is one town, one entity, split between two countries. Something truly unforeseen in the world. Now, why it's one town in two countries, as its city motto says, it's basically Valga got built up big time during the Russian Empire to serve as a junction between the Baltics, which it returns today, and then, following the collapse of said empire, this town, about 50% Estonian, 50% Latvian, now with their own nation states, suddenly found themselves in a pickle. Now, despite being on the same side, both parties, particularly their really cocky commanders, just couldn't help but squabble over this meaningless odd town. And that almost ended up in a war right after a bigger war, right after an even bigger war, a Teemu-Vilnius dispute. A Latvian officer captain proclaimed, "We have 6 divisions now, we will take Valka and beat you up." To which the Estonian counterpart said, "Fine, you can have Valga, but our navy will have Riga." Yeah, so the Latvians actually were in no real position to fight back, as they had gotten tossed around in their own war of independence, and it ended up being Estonia who had to come over and carry Latvia through the war, first against the Reds and then the German Landwehr. Eventually though, the Brits, with their famously good border drawing skills, stepped in and alleviated the tension by sending a dude across the entire border region, going door to door, and whatever language they responded in, well, that was gonna be your country now. And thus, Valga got split up half and half. Now, honestly, I just used visiting Valga as an excuse to tell this cool story, and if it weren't for that, Valga would be dead and erased from maps a long time ago. But thanks to being specifically between these two countries, cheap alcohol has saved the day.
Top 10 things how to boost your state's and city economy. Number 1, alcohol shop. Okay, thanks for watching.
Yeah, so this whole way of alcohol thing here was for the longest time a joke, but recently it has become quite a real thing, especially for Southern Estonians. So you already know. As for the border itself, it's definitely nice to take a stroll across. There is an intact old 90s border point that now has a tourist info center and a mini golf course. You can very Estonianly swing in both countries at once.
So right now we're in Estonia, now we're in Latvia, now we're in Eesti, now we're in third world.
This is scary. I'm next to third world country.
This is the most extreme you can get. This is like the DMZ.
And it all centers around this main street with this old border post, the old crossing 100 years ago. There are also a couple of cool spots.
Valga really type of city to just have European capital of culture on a dilapidated building. Truly cultural.
Yes.
I feel so cultured here.
Yes.
Especially in the border of
The fucking door without the fucking staircase. How am I supposed to enter my crib?
Such as this main square with the town hall, home to the first ever Estonian mayor of any city. One thing outside the border I would recommend you visit though is a small war museum here. It is awesome.
T34 Eesti Vopiga. I'm gonna drive this thing. Hi guys, this is the tour of my new Albanian mansion. You get an additional bucket and pretty much that's it.
Oh, and of course this absolute palace that is the train station. All in all, an interesting corner of the country that if you're going to be passing through it, given it's like the only other place for cross-border transit to Latvia, then make sure to hop by. But it's definitely not worth going out of your way to visit it, lol. The Napoleonic Wars never reached Estonia, and yet, in the random village of Jõgeveste, just 30 kilometers up the road, there is the mausoleum to none other than the Baltic German-Russian Field Marshal Barclay de Tolly, the second most prominent and important commander of the whole empire during the Napoleonic Wars, and after being in charge of the defense of the Baltic, he, who was said to be accompanied by Estonians, conquered Paris. And then he died, and because he couldn't out-ego that fat chad Kutuzov, who he was in a rivalry with, rather than being buried in the Kazan Cathedral of St. Petersburg, where apparently there wasn't any more room, the Romanovs and the Barclays just sat down at this random village one day and decided they'd simply bury him here. And I gotta tell you, this piece of Napoleonic history just being out here is really cool. Inside the mausoleum there's a sculpture of him being crowned and adorned with both the Russian and the Napoleonic French crowns. There really is no limit to the ego, huh? A private host manages it all, including the park and the involved bodies and everything, and she's super nice and explains everything really well, and this surely can't be cheap to upkeep. So do me a favor and visit this place. This mausoleum is part of another special region of the country, and the last one for today, Mulgimaa. It's not special or unique in the way Setomaa is, nor is their dialect as big or distinct enough to be a separate language from Estonian like the Võro. Instead, their whole spiel is just like being better than everyone else. Like, to really dive into Mulgimaa, who else to call but an ethno guy and local Mulg, who's been appearing throughout the video, my partner in crime, Estokane. But first, we gotta dive into Mulgimaa. There's no AC in this, by the way, and it's 30 degrees outside.
Mina olen üks veider vennik, minu taskus ainult pennine. Mina olen üks veider vennik, minu taskus ainult pennine.
So, like the Setos, the Mulks also has some resemblance to a specific group of people by being historically more isolated and self-sufficient than anyone else, and of course, better with finance. After all, like the old saying goes, the joke right when the mulk was born. Historically, they were seen as these pesky, bad mulks. The name is said to be derived from Slovenia, who go around rage baiting the Estonian peasants with how much better and fancier they are. They took full advantage of this and turned it into their identity, being the proudest and poshest Estonians. They'd always had the biggest land, the fanciest farms, the prettiest horses, the toughest fit. They even were the first era to obtain property from the nobility. Today, anything that could be remotely mulkish are plastered everywhere. Patterns, food, you name it. In terms of what to see or rather drive through.
Bro, we need to get the torches. Okay, where the fuck are you going? I don't see shit anymore.
I'm here.
There are some nice towns. The Mulkish resort of Tõrva, a quaint town of 2600 that draws people in the summer for its lake and its fire shenanigans, but more importantly for the sandstone statue of Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky as the Statue of Liberty, with some other exhibits of the struggle for freedom of both Ukraine and the Baltics. God bless Estonia. There's also no shortage of Order castle ruins atop meandering hills, such as the one in Karksi, home to our very own Leaning Tower of Pisa. The Mulkish capital of Abjavoloja.
ainsad turistid praegu Abjavolojas.
mul praegu viimased turistid olid siin 2021.
And the ex-smallest town in Estonia, Võisakõla, with 741 people and one lone train. There's one place definitely worth visiting though, and that's the Mulgi Experience Center, right next to the much more popular, oversaturated, capitalistic hellscape of Vaagiküla. And that's about it from me. I hope you learned something new and interesting about us Mulgiks and our viited Mulgimaa. If you feel interested to know more about me, you can follow me on Twitter, Estonian, as I'm very active there, or just give me a follow on Instagram, Estonian.
Aitüma. And yeah, the Mulgi Experience Center really is awesome. It's very new and it's built in the style of new and old at the same time. Tells the story of the Mulks, is interactive, has the traditional farms and everything. It is just great. To cap off this absolute odyssey, there's no better place than the second largest city of Southern Estonia and the Estonian cultural resort, Viljandi. At first it feels like any other and seems unremarkable, but then, in the end of July each year, the quiet city transforms into the largest annual music festival in Estonia and one of the largest folk music festivals in Europe. This is Viljandi Folk. This festival is absolute peak. It revolves around folk music but is mixed into normal music and many of the artists come from abroad. It's a real big deal and it's quite pricey, but honestly is worth every penny. The music is great and I've been using it throughout the video, but honestly it's just a vibe and friendly atmosphere that really draws people here. The whole town is made really cozy, clean and just nice. There's so much to do, you can spend day and night here hanging around. Viljandi is like a folk fairy tale. Man, it's so late. What could the time be? Oh, it's folk time. While the best time to explore Estonia is on its own in the middle of July, I implore you to add this and experience it yourself. But hey, come for the festival, stay for the town. Viljandi is really pleasant year-round and is perhaps the most Estonian city of them all. Wooden houses with winding streets, castle ruins. Yeah. This place was once home to another extensive Estonian hill fort, home to the greatest resistance of the whole Crusades. In 1211, the spiritually enlightened gang pulled up in force to try and take it, but failed. And after eventually seizing it after the dust had settled, suddenly an uprising sprung up and took it over for about 2 weeks, until finally German rule solidified and the new castle and town of Viljandi, or Felin, was founded. Then it became the second bloody largest castle in all of Livonia after Riga and became the HQ of the Livonian Order alongside Cesis in Latvia. But as you can see, but not in as good of a state anymore, I don't think. Today, it and its castle hills are a park in town, and it's a really nice spot to stroll through, with a gorgeous view over Lake Viljandi. And while it once accommodated rich German knights, nowadays it accommodates the folk festival with its rich Estonian visitors. There's also Freedom Square with its war memorial, a 13th century church, and yeah, a nice square, you know. Up until only a few years ago, however, this place was a wasteland, just a big car park with this absolute monstrosity at its center. Aitäh, no go delete. So yeah, the glow up is great. We end this deep dive into southern Estonia, at the shores of the largest lake fully within the country, Võrtsjärv. Now I would say something really epic and inspirational about my homeland that would truly encompass the whole experience, but honestly, all I gotta say is Jumala vinge koht on, kurat. It's authentic and off the beaten path, and there's definitely a thing or two I didn't mention, and it's a box full of surprises waiting for visitors. Give Estonia outside Tallinn a try. As a Tallinner, it's pretty damn good. In case I'm still alive by the time I get around to publishing this mammoth video, next time we're going back to the big world. Aitüma et kaesite.